much. So I know I'm the only person standing between you and the lunch, so this is a tough spot to be in. I understand, so I'm not going to sell you anything. In fact, I'm trying to just educate and share my experiences. And we'll see if that's an interesting topic for you. So I think OpenClaw has been a very hot topic, and a lot of people have been experimenting with it. Can I get a raise of hands who has been experimenting with OpenClaw? And yeah, a lot of people. So that's great. That's actually great, because you will be able to get something from this talk, hopefully. So the title of the talk is like security and efficiency for agents, and those two things are really related. The way you configure agents and you configure the tools that your agent uses to get things done in an efficient and secure way. And we had already a lot of incidents here, and a lot of experience has been gained in very painful ways. Because people were using OpenClaw, putting it on the open internet, installing it on their personal machines, setting it off to delete their emails, installing skills from a marketplace, never checking anything what's behind it. So those painful points have already been made, and you're here to hear about it and to not repeat the same mistakes. There was a study done where they surveyed who is configuring OpenClaw on like an open port on a VPS, and in fact there were like a lot of machines. I think over 100,000 machines were found, and from these 100,000 machines, 30,000 were actually exploitable. So because if you set up everything like it's in the manual, like most people hopefully do, you will have like a token authentication set up correctly. So that's valid, yeah, that protects you from some things, but still you should not expose your port to the open internet, because what you didn't know in January when it came out is there are actually some CVEs where you were able to connect via WebSocket to OpenClaw to extract the token otherwise. So so 30,000 were not correctly configured. 341 skills were actually found to contain malicious code. This is a very small number compared to the total number of skills, so the chance that you picked one of these is low, but still skills are essentially like a binary that you install on your OpenClaw instance. So just because it's just a piece of text doesn't mean it can be harmful, right? So your agent is going to follow whatever is in here, and I've personally published skills and published CLIs, so if this passes all the tests, it's a good skill, it's useful, but if I decide I want to update my CLI and you just do the pipx updates as one does, I will be able to get root access to your agent if I decide to. So every little skill can be harmful. Let's be careful about that. So one story that a lot of people have seen, and we got curious about what's really behind it, was the story of the Facebook security researcher, Summer Yu, who had a lot of emails deleted, and it wasn't really clear from the start what was really the root cause of this, because it's not so trivial to figure out, okay, I instruct my OpenClaw to do something for me, and then it doesn't follow it anymore. Why does that happen? So if you talk to your agent or to your clanker, some say, or you give it some other nice name, it will have a context window, and that context window is very limited in what it can contain. So if you're at the start of the conversation, give it some instructions, please don't delete this without asking me first. It will follow that for a while, and then once the context window fills up, it gets compacted, and you don't know exactly what ends up in the compact state. So whatever you think is part of its modus operandi might not be the case anymore. So you'll have to think about, where do I put these instructions and where do I put the approval for these actions. That can be, if you know the memory system very well, you can put it in like the agents.d file, it will be always included, but on the other hand, you don't really know what ends up in the context anyways, so if there is an email and there is like a prompt injection inside an email, that instruction might be overridden again. So let's be very careful about that. How do we deal with that in practice? These types of tools and confirmations have to be escalated to other agents, to real humans, or some sort of corporate policy engine, or to instruct or to set up your tools in a way where all the actions the agent does is not non-destructive. And for that, I want to give you a short overview about what are these terms even. There are so many terms around and how they relate to each other. It's not entirely clear. Your agent is, let's start at the bottom. You have an interface. You have something called a channel. The channel is possibly an incoming email, a chat interface like on Discord, or you open up a WhatsApp channel or Telegram, whatever. With the bot. The channel is abstract and it has multiple instances of channel. Every time you talk to it, it might start a new instance of the channel. And every new instance of the channel generates a new session. The session itself is like the context window, like when you talk to ChatGPT, and it's always attached to one particular agent. The agent is just a logical definition that sits on your host computer. Okay? I'll get to the topic of host computer in a second. But those agents, they look like separated, but they don't have any boundary between them. So if you set up multiple agents within one gateway or one computer, either it's a virtual machine, a Docker container, a NAS, or something else, those agents, they have their own instruction sets, but they can leave hints, and one agent can just override whatever it wants from the other agents by default. So there are isolation levels, but they are not on by default. Okay? And they also don't work every time, because if you run, for example, inside a virtual machine that's a Mac virtual machine, you cannot use the Docker-based isolation engine, for example. You have to use something else. So I would say, because this is a big moving target, if you are like a casual user of OpenClaw, just set up one agent. That's the easiest solution. Assume that this is all connected into one. And so around the agents, they live in a virtual machine or a Docker image. I would not recommend running this on your work computer, where you have your personal emails. That can be a big disaster potentially. If you want to run it on your laptop, there are many ways to run it. So, for example, I run multiple agents. One of them sits inside a virtual machine on my laptop, where I can then have a dedicated account for it as well. Okay, so when you set up your agent, you need to know what tools do I give it and what potential blast radius does it have, right? Because everything the agent touches, potentially it can destroy. That's not a joke, right? So when you set it up, you will not set it up by connecting your personal Gmail or otherwise workspace email to that agent. Set up a dedicated email account. And you can authorize it in many ways. For example, I have it fork my repositories from GitHub, perform some work, and make a pull request for myself. I can review it. That's like a very serious, easy boundary to set up. The other things is, at some point you want to make it something useful, and for that, you will need to connect data to it. I will not go into all the details because the time is limited, but CLIs are a great tool for that. And if you have a specialized CLI or you are in a company, you want to provide access to certain company data to an agent, you probably want to implement a CLI where you configure exactly what type of access it has, set that up separately, and then you connect to it through, for example, through the interface, and the agent never sees the real credential data because that's hidden on a different layer for them. Okay? Some of the actions that an agent does, this is not limited to OpenClaw. I would say this is also especially relevant for all agentic use cases with Codex, Cloud Code, or Pi, which is the agent that's or the harness that's used by OpenClaw under the hood. You want to have human escalations for certain real destructive actions that might be really useful to do. So I set it up to, for example, be able to deploy to production, to actually get read access to the database. But that is guarded behind biometric access by my fingerprint. Okay, so if the agent tries to do something here, it will escalate to my host machine. It will ask me the questions, am I allowed to do this? This is the command that I want to run. Now you have to provide the fingerprint. Can it circumvent that? No, because I will just inject the information through in memory, through a process, and provide the decryption credentials that, for example, an encrypted environment file is only encrypted on the fly. Okay? So this is one of these life cycles that you potentially have to think about. A topic that I've been touching a little bit already is credential hygiene. You set up your own email account, but you also set up your own SSH key when it logs into specific machines potentially. You set up specific API keys, and you want to make sure that you log everything that the agent does potentially. And one thing that comes up here frequently is agent needs to interact with, say, a website or an API. If that API needs a login, then you're already in a bad spot, because if you don't set up a skill up front for that, all the requests that you give to the agent at some point will have to contain the credentials, and those credentials then also go to the LLM provider. So if you use like an open marketplace like Flock or OpenRouter, or even like some third-party or first-party API provider for LLMs, they will have these credentials in their log files. So what happens potentially is that those credentials will at some point end up in the training data set for future models. So if somebody will ask, okay, I need to log into this website, how do I do that? Yeah, of course, I have your key, there it is, and that's potentially even a valid key. So if you don't isolate that through a CLI, you will have a problem potentially in the future with that. Okay, classic, I will not spend too much time on this because it's been a topic since I think 2022. Prompt injections are still a thing. Models have gotten a lot better, so there is the easiest ones, they don't work anymore. But one thing you can do, if you have a complex workflow, you want the input to be conforming to the data format that you want to use. So whatever workflow you set up, frequently it's very useful to force a model to export or to provide a response according to a JSON schema. So there are very good ways how you can use LLM APIs to say, no, you are not allowed to just talk freely. You need to speak in the language of this JSON schema, and then you can take that and use a deterministic tool to execute the tasks behind that. That's very effective together with agents. Second to last slide, audit trails are relatively weak right now because by default, OpenClaw will log to the temporary directory of your machine. If you restart the machine, it's gone. Why is it doing that into the temporary directory? Because it can contain confidential data. That's not sanitized logs. So those are toxic log files. They need to be cleaned up. But if you know what you're doing and you say, okay, I want to store this in a sink, for example, in a dedicated sink where data ends up in encrypted form already, then you want to do this and store to a persistent location. If you don't have these audit logs, if something goes wrong, it's really hard to figure out what it does. So OpenClaw does have a great format for that already. The gateway logs and the command logger. They log on a more tool-oriented level. And the third one, I researched this, apparently that's important, I don't know exactly what it is. So there is like a OLTP, like online log collection systems that exist, that are possible to connect to OpenClaw, but I haven't personally integrated that yet. Yeah? OTLP. Possibly, yeah. Be more familiar. I think in the future version, they will have something built in. So there are open issues for that, and lots of people are thinking about that, and there are lots of tool providers who are eager to provide value here. Okay. Where's the last slide? Yeah. So that's what's your takeaway for today? Either if you are building something that is going to be used by agents, you should look at what tools do I want to create and what small command surface do I want to provide. If you want to know more about this, I built some CLIs that are used by agents and can tell you like some more best practices for that. Be very explicit about what I'm targeting. So if I'm deleting an email, I need like a -- confirm flag inside my CLI for that, for example. Be very deterministic in my outputs. If you are just somebody who wants to operate an agent to do something for your personal needs or for your company needs, you should really think hard about the credentials, as we talked about this. Don't use your main computer. Very important. Very good targets are use a virtual server. There you will have possibly more troubles with like using the browser. But if you are interested in use cases where the browser is relevant, use a virtual machine. That's very reasonable. Most people will be happy with a macOS-based virtual machine. If you also have Docker-based use cases, use a Linux-based virtual machine. You could use the browser and Docker itself as well in that environment. On Mac, you cannot use in a virtualized environment Docker as far as I know. Yeah, and write down what you're doing, and if something goes wrong, don't complain to me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. A few questions. Any questions?
Yeah. What's the main point of the CLI that you keep bringing up? Does that mean that those are like tools that the agent then uses, like specialized, like custom, instead of using some kind of default?
Yeah. So if you are trying to access an API, like for example GitHub,
right.
Okay,
yeah.
You could theoretically provide the agent with your bearer token, your session keys, etc. Just paste those keys and say use curl and post a new issue on GitHub. Okay? Yeah. Theoretically, that's possible. That's a very bad idea because GitHub provides you with a really state-of-the-art CLI tool that you install on your machine, and then without the agent interacting on that machine or that virtual machine, you log in to that GitHub account, which is obviously just the agent-specific GitHub account, not your personal GitHub account. You log in one time, GitHub puts these bearer credentials in the operating system security key store, keychain, and then whenever you need to do something, you can then, first of all, you can also authorize the scope of this, but you can then execute commands on GitHub using just GH, pull request, whatever, create. And because all the LLMs are trained on text and they are very, very familiar with the syntax and the possibilities of composition of different Unix tools. This is like the totally natural language for every agent to do that. They will be very efficient in using this. And think about how much text a curl request that provides JSON and whatever takes compared to a small sentence GitHub create issue, right? So you will save like 90%, 96% of tokens relying on the CLI tools compared to doing it bare hands. Like it's like using your bare hands to dig a hole versus a tractor or whatever.
Yeah, but so.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll talk to you later about it.
Okay.
Related question. Are MCPs tested?
So basically not yet. I think trend-wise, as people are still using MCPs more, but I think people are misunderstanding what they're really good for. MCPs are very good if it's a very stateful thing that lives on a server to integrate with an agent. CLIs can also be stateful, but they are more oriented towards local state. So, but you can use both in both cases. MCPs are toxic to the context because they you have to load up the whole thing up front. So if you don't need an MCP, you always carry a big overhead. And what I always say when we build these agentic systems for various use cases is, you want to get stuff done, and you are limited in the complexity of the task by how much context you have. Okay? So, and if you are building up tools that are using already 20, 30, 40% of the context, you can take like 4 or 5 of these tools or whatever maximum into your context. Whereas when you have a CLI and a skill-based thing, you can maybe take 100 times more into the context. So that means the type of task you can perform well and the speed at which you can perform it is possibly 20 times better. So that's, I think, a clear advantage for CLIs versus MCPs. But sometimes you don't have a choice. Like if you're using Figma, you only have an MCP. There is no Figma CLI yet. I don't know. With Playwright, for example, the choice became clear because I used to use Playwright MCP and now I use Playwright CLI. It's approximately the same, but it's much easier to set up the Playwright CLI in comparison. Yeah,
Yeah, it probably comes from a lack of sophistication on this. But I've been wondering if a prompt injection can influence the Soul MD document, and can the CLI protect that? Because the Soul MD is really the heart of what the agent might do.
Well, so the Soul MD is just a file that's appended to the agent's MD, and the agent can overwrite it whenever it feels like it. So no, there is no inherent protection in OpenCloud today for the Soul MD. You could do something very simple. You could simply have the Soul MD assigned to different Unix user on your system, and well, then you can't overwrite it. It's very simple, right? So then it would say, yeah, I tried to overwriting the Soul MD, but it didn't work. Why not? Yeah, because I don't have permission to do that, right? Use Unix tools as you see fit.
Okay, one last question.
One last question.
So everyone's going and installing OpenClaw, but there are other variants, right?
Yeah.
Have you explored other variants, and there are some that are more secure, or that you would recommend people to like start off with?
I have only experimented a little bit. I've last week played with IronClaw from DeAI. It's interesting, especially the part that I like most about it is because they put a lot of effort in auditability of the LLM stack. So they have something interesting with trusted execution environments. Somebody is into that. I'm very much into information gathering mode on TEEs combined with LLMs. So that's also what IronClaw has as part of that stack. But it's still very rough, I would say. It's smaller, less complex, but it can do a lot of things not yet that I would expect the agent to be able to do. So play around with it. It's also free to use, I think. So they provide it now for free. You get a free Unix box somewhere on the internet. Might be useful, right? So just play around with it, I would say. Okay.
Thank you again.
Thank you so much.